we've got a guest on today, and she's actually an FDN amongst many other things. Her name is Bridgit Danner. But a little bit of background here with Bridgit. She has a master's in Oriental Medicine, and she's an acupuncturist, located, as far as I know, still in Oregon. Maybe you can correct me, Bridgit, on that if I'm wrong on that. And then also she has a whole host of other continuing education. Amongst those is FDN, and this list I'm looking at is just a mile long, so very cool to see all that education there. And also you published a couple books as well, so really out there doing some really excellent work. And so thanks for being on, Bridgit.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks for having me. And I wanted to, give another congratulations to the graduates. I know it's a lot of work to get through the course, so good job.
Hello, everybody. Sorry I was late getting on.
Hi, Reed.
Hey, Bridgit. Fantastic to have you on. Congratulations on everything you're doing. I really enjoyed our summit that we did, and I really appreciate you having me as one of your presenters on the Women's Wellness Summit. I don't know how far along you got here, but congratulations on that. That's just amazing, the great work you're doing there.
Yeah, it's like my second baby. That kind of a thing. It's a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun, and I definitely wanted FDN represented, so thanks for being on there.
Yeah, it was a riot. So, Brandon, were you at a certain point where, because I just jumped on and I'm sorry for being late.
Oh, that's fine. We're actually just about to turn it over to Bridgit to let her start to inform us and help us learn here today. So, it's Bridget's time, so we're ready to go there.
All right, so Bridgit, thank you for being on, and I know you want to discuss fertility.
Yeah, so I thought that this could be helpful for the FDNs listening. Some people may already be specializing in fertility, but others, may not, and are getting some of those people popping up in their practice, or wondering, should I specialize in this? So I thought it would be fun to come on and kind of share some of my experiences and also some of my little tidbits of information about fertility. So as a little background, about 1 in 8 couples experience infertility, although I think that could actually be higher. So infertility is technically defined as not able to conceive within 1 year of trying. So, a lot of why that comes about are hormonal issues, or issues of like inflammation and malnutrition that we can work with in FDN, and then there's some other things that are kind of beyond the scope of FDN to consider. So I just thought we'd get the conversation going on that.
Yep.
Reed, tell me where you'd like to go first.
Well, it's a great area. We help just about anybody with just about anything. FDN's not designed to treat specific conditions or diseases, or, we don't diagnose, but we treat everything non-specifically. So regardless of the problem that someone comes with, we should be able to help them by improving overall function on a cellular level, on a tissue level, on an organ level, on a system level. And if it affects all of them, then if the system happens to be the reproductive one, that should get better too. And we notice right away when people start doing the DRESS protocol, diet and rest and exercise and reducing stress and things like that, and you might take some supplements to improve function of this and that and everything. Well, guess what? You might be more likely to get pregnant when you're healthier. So I've seen fertility cases completely turn around. And I'll never forget the one call, and then I'll turn it over to you, but I'll never forget the one call I got. I was sitting at my desk, and I get this call, and, hey, Reed, it's so-and-so. Yeah, and I could tell she was in the car driving. She was passing. Her husband was driving, and and they're both clients of mine, and like good old clients. She's like, we just came from the doctor's office, and we're pregnant. And I'm like, well, that's congratulations. Thanks for telling me. I'm wondering, well, why are you telling me? Aren't you supposed to call your mother first or something, and tell her? they're like, no, we got to tell you, the first thing we thought of when we left the doctor's office was, this is Reed's work. This is all the good work we've been doing with you, getting healthier and everything. They were going through bug treatment, just everything. So I said, oh, okay, well, that's fantastic. Good for you. And she goes, no, you don't understand. We gave up 9 years ago trying to get pregnant. I go,
wow.
Yeah, so they had so they don't use birth control, obviously, and it gave up trying to get pregnant. And she was quite ill. I would say she was sort of a complex FDN case. But guess what? Complex or simple, it doesn't matter. When you get people doing the right things, fertility can turn around. I mean, sex drive improves and all kinds of things. So I've got a tremendous respect for the area that you're kind of niching here. It's a great niche, and I commend you, and I just want to support you any and every way I can. And FDN should follow. So for all the FDNs listening, if you have an interest in this niche, just listen to what Bridgit has to say, because we totally can help people.
Yeah, and I might give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, because this is actually a niche I was in for a few years pretty strongly, and I kind of decided to back up a bit. And I'll tell you kind of some of the components of all that. On the good part, it's a very fascinating field. There's so much to learn about infertility. It's super rich. There's a lot of clients out there who need your help. So that's really exciting. Some of the things I ran into are, around the emotional component. So it's incredibly stressful to go through infertility. I heard one talk, and she said that a couple experienced infertility or going through that for a year is like the same level of stress as one of the partners having a cancer diagnosis. Like, it's really intense for people, and if you've never been through it yourself, it's hard to know. So getting kind of up close to that and seeing it was definitely a lot to take on. And also I found that the relationship between the man and the woman would often kind of break down in that process. What I saw quite a bit, at least in my practice, was that the woman was interested in holistic care, and the man was not, or thought it was, hokey or a waste of money or whatever, or that the woman was trying really hard and going to all these appointments and getting acupuncture, and the guy was like not doing anything like whatsoever to change his diet and lifestyle. So I kind of took a little bit of a step back from working only in fertility to say, well, let me work with women's health and hormones, because if we wait till we're trying to get pregnant, you can take a step back and say, okay, well, I need to heal my gut, I need to restore my adrenal function and all that. But we can also catch people much earlier. So for myself in my own practice, I decided to broaden out a bit to say, let me start educating women from a younger age so they understand these things about their body and how their cycle works. So when they get to the point that they're trying to conceive, they're better able to. That being said, not everyone will seek out that information until they're conceiving, right? So there's going to be a lot of cases where people do need to do a lot of this fundamental work like we do in FDN when they're already trying to conceive. So, and a few words of caution if you take on infertility cases. If somebody's been trying for a year or two, and, FDN might work very quickly, but it also might take some time, right? So, maybe even for safety reasons, like if you're going to do some strong, parasite protocol or what have you, you don't really want to be conceiving at that time. You want to take a break. So just to kind of have that awareness that these are people who have really been waiting, and if you're going to work with them and ask them to take a break from trying or tell them it might take a while, be really upfront about that. And, get them, like Reed, you teach, get them on board from the beginning about what we do. If it's their choice, if they decide, I'm not on board with that, then that's fine too. But explain to the process, and I know, Reed, you say you often will get their partner on the call too. Get them both on the call, really explain the process, explain how, we're not here to diagnose your fertility case, we're here to maximize your health. Maybe get both the partners to do the program. I just think, be aware of that there's a lot of sensitivity around time for those people.
I really appreciate you raising that part of it, because that's not exactly covered in the FDN course. Obviously when we do the DRESS program, guided by lab work and such, you just get them in our process, they're going to get healthier. But there's a lot of things under the stress reduction area, the DRES, the first test, that's not, it's not really my scope, and so you mentioned sort of the relationships, how it could be very stressful. So you might be, if you're going to take on someone with a fertility issue, you could be dealing with some pretty serious relationship things, or this could mean their marriage or something like that. You know what I mean? It's not just their health; it's their mental health as well, and happiness.
Yeah, I mean, marriages end in fertility struggle. It's kind of a sad fact. I think when we get together as couples, like, we are attracted to each other, we have some things in common, but we haven't maybe had some of these hard conversations about, what are our values around how we approach medicine. How much do we really want to have a baby? Are we opposed to adoption? Are we okay with adoption? What about a sperm donor? What about an egg donor? It brings up a lot of stuff. And then also, reproduction is a very, base desire. It's like second chakra, first chakra, like survival and reproduction. And a lot of that comes with, some fears, and also some sense of self and questioning, who am I? Like, if, I can't get my partner pregnant, who am I? And it's some really deep stuff. So, just having some people to refer to, perhaps, or to work with if you're going to be doing more fertility cases. Just knowing a lot can come up there, and knowing your own capability about what you can help with.
And it could be either way. I was just thinking while you're talking there, if it's the man, let's say the man has low sperm, I don't know, something like that, it could really affect the couple, and if the woman is not able to, pop out some babies, she may also have some self-worth issues, if that's her value system. I'm not saying that's mine. I'm just saying that yeah, because my first wife, who I had my son with originally, she got had an operation, got, what do you call it, fixed, like no more baby, closed the factory down. And I was really kind of pissed, have one son, and now, and it was like, wow, what'd you do that for? That wasn't part, she didn't even ask me, it was really very upsetting. So I feel you when you're saying you're going to be dealing with some issues.
Yeah, not to say every case will be like this, but as far as what I want, so a few things, one of the things I want FDNs to know is if you think, oh, well, I'll get into this specialty, there's lots of people who need it, just kind of have some sensitivity and know what you're getting into, and really, treat those people with a lot of respect, because they've been through a lot internally to before they've gotten to you.
Mm-hmm.
Bridgit, I might ask you if you think this. Talked about how people get together and they don't necessarily talk about, maybe infertility or the possibility of that. They talk about, your views on money or in-laws or religion or things like that when you come together. Do you think that conversation doesn't go on because in the last, have infertility cases increased over the past, 50 or 75 years, where it's not quite in our consciousness to talk about the possibility of that happening? Do you think that's why that just doesn't come up as often?
That's a good question. So, historically, there's always been infertility, right? For different reasons historically, but I don't know, I read a lot of historical fiction and stuff, and there was different ways to promote fertility back then. You pray under a certain tree, or you have a certain amulet or whatever. So I think it's always been a thing in human life, but it is probably increasing with environmental toxicity and adrenal dysregulation and what do you say, Reed, metabolic chaos. Our health is decreasing, and we're also trying to get pregnant often later in life. So, yeah, it's probably not a conversation we have, because when you're in love and starting a family, you don't think you don't think the worst, or you don't think there's going to be a problem. But I think it is an important thing to consider, because I think a lot of couples just focus on, well, we're going to buy the right house and we're going to have a nursery, and they kind of like envision it, which is great, but the body has to go along with that vision, and our bodies have to be healthy enough to get there. And yeah, like most people, don't really have a conversation early on around, well, like, what are your values around medicine? Like, what approaches would you want to use? How much money would you be willing to spend on fertility? How badly do you really want to have a kid? Like, these aren't questions that, we ask. And maybe we don't need to ask on the first date, but I think, it's fair to discuss at some point. I would say before you start trying, if you say we're going to try in a year or we're going to try in 6 months, we'll have a conversation about preparing your bodies. It's not just preparing the nursery, it's preparing your body. And then, yeah, I'm not totally sure, how often people would say, would you consider adoption or this or that, but my clients who are already having trouble with infertility, I encourage them to have the conversation, because a lot of times there's like this elephant in the room about adoption or egg donor or whatever. And if you can just have the conversation, like, well, what if this happens? What will we do? It kind of just takes that, like, that tension away to just talk about it. So, for instance, I remember when I was like engaged, I was like, had some nervousness about getting married, and I thought, well, okay, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, the worst thing that could happen is, I get divorced, he cheats on me and we get divorced, And I had to kind of like accept the worst case scenario in order to move forward. So I don't know, maybe that's a weird thing, but I think that in fertility too, if we can say, hey, worst case scenario is, we adopt, or we do invest a lot in IVF, or we decide we don't want to have a kid. That's the worst case scenario. But we can do it together, and we're going to move forward through all the steps, and, we're going to, become parents one way or the other.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, so far as FDNs go, are there anything, I mean, we mentioned that, we don't deal a lot with some of those relationship issues, not in our training, but we are going to come across it. But I mean, what ways do you think FDN is really good? I got some other questions for you, but what do you think FDN is really sort of best at? Really, why is it really great for fertility? Where would FDN fit into your program?
Yeah, and one thing I like about FDN is, it's for men and women, and the hormone testing is so powerful and so great, because a lot of issues with fertility have to do with hormones, insufficient levels of hormones, mistimed hormones, adrenal fatigue causing sex hormone depletion. So this is huge for fertility. So this is really important that we have those tools. Other things we do around the food sensitivity testing, the decrease inflammation, I think are so important. It's such a stress on the body, as we know, but also if there's a lot of inflammation like in the uterus, and that can be hard for the embryo to implant and grow. The gut healing is so important. That's a chronic stress on the body, and it's probably something that a lot of couples don't think, oh, well, my gut might be keeping me from getting pregnant, but if that is indeed the case, then, we have the tools to deal with that. So, I think we have so many strong tools, like you said, that aren't specific to diagnosis, and that's really great if people can come on board with that. Just getting the nutrition from the foods, healing the gut, so we're absorbing our nutrition. We really need that nutrition as ingredients to make sperm and to grow our eggs, and, to ovulate correctly and have a strong luteal phase. So all these bases definitely make for fertility.
Yeah, that's really a good point. I've had great success with it, just getting people on that DRESS program, and of course, balancing hormones, reducing stress. Your body's much more likely to want to procreate. I mean, procreation is a pro-survival, you might as well say, survival of the species. So it's a very procreative and pro-survival thing. Doing dress is pro-survival, procreative. So, is there anything besides that relationship component that we might overlook in FDN that you've noticed? Like, is there something that FDNs probably would want to know that if FDN was the only training they had, let's say?
Yeah, so I think there's some good things to know about. So one would be like structural issues, like let's say that the woman has what they call a bicornate uterus, like a heart-shaped uterus. If that's too severe, then that can really affect the ability to carry a child. Also, if her tubes are blocked, which can just be like inflammation and can be worked with, but it's good to know if the tubes are blocked. For men, something called a varicocele is pretty common. It's kind of like a swollen like blood vessel. So basically it's causing heat on the scrotum, and the heat is now making the scrotum too hot to be able to produce sperm correctly. And that can be visible, but it also can be kind of invisible, like you don't see it, but it's there. So something like that we could never know about in FDN. So especially if somebody comes to you and they're like, look, we've already been trying for a year and now we're on our own and now we want to try FDN, I would say really ask them, have you been checked out? Have you been to the reproductive endocrinologist? Have you been to your doctor? Have you had an ultrasound of your uterus? Have you had your testes looked at? Have you run any tests? Because if they are having one of these structural issues and they don't know about it, then nothing you do, could work. And then they've just spent more time. So what you do is very helpful, of course, in an FDN, but if and for men, sometimes they think they're putting out sperm, but they had some kind of developmental problem, and, when they were developing in the womb, and they actually, don't expel any sperm. So there's some unknown problems that can go on that are worth checking out. So I would say one is encourage your clients to go see the doctor, even if they're more into natural stuff. There's a few things that are worth knowing. Another is like the age factor. So age is a really strong factor in fertility, especially for women, but also for men. I think I've had some clients come to me who are like 44, 45, even late 40s, and they're saying, well, I want to get pregnant, naturally, I think it's possible. It's possible, but I think it's important not to give people like a false sense. Maybe if we were all living like on this beautiful like desert island and perfect diet and no toxins, maybe we would still be producing babies at that age. But most couples in their early 40s, they've already somewhat compromised, and the women's eggs have been around longer than she's been around, and their possibility of producing a pregnancy to term are pretty low. So I think just, being honest with them about that, looking up some of the numbers, and you can offer to help them, but, sometimes you need an egg donor, or you need to go another route, and that's just kind of going to be how it is.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, it sounds expensive, but whatever.
Kids are expensive, as you know, Reed, so sometimes they start out that way, too.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think you also are dealing with people who get pretty desperate and do just about anything. I know they talk about that clock is ticking syndrome, where women just figure they waited too long and stuff. Best to get that childbearing out of the way when you're younger. Not too much younger, though. I've also heard it explained another way that males tend to make much better dads if they wait till they're older. They just really haven't got their stuff together yet, Not in today's world, anyway. Well, yeah. So in terms of DRESS, is there something about the diet, like D, like diet? What would you say are some of your favorite foods or supplements or something like that? DRESS. What you got some favorite things? Do you put people on a special fertility diet, or what do you, is fertility supplements, or what do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the core diet is the same diet I would recommend for anybody for health. And, my take on that is, lowish carbs, moderate protein, and high fat, whole foods all the time. I will tell you, I've been creating this program, and I look up every one of the micronutrients, and then I look up food sources. So it's interesting. I've really saw some patterns on, the foods with the most micronutrients. And definitely what comes up a lot are some of the nuts and seeds. So pumpkin seed, man, that popped up so often for having a good amount of different micronutrients, like zinc. Brazil nuts, are a good source of selenium. Sunflower seeds came up a lot. So nuts and seeds, almonds, basically all the nuts and seeds are really powerful. You can soak them overnight for better digestion. And the first time I tried, soaked nuts, I thought it was really weird, but you get really used to it, actually, and you kind of start to feel like, dry, kind of hard nuts are you can feel how they're a little less digestible. So if people have trouble digesting, they can try that. And if people have such sensitivity to certain nuts and seeds on their test, they can there's still lots of other ones to choose from. So this came up a lot. We need our fat-soluble vitamins for fertility, so grass-fed butter, organ meats, grass-fed meats, that kind of thing. Fishes, high-quality fatty fishes are important. The greens are obviously very important. The leafy greens are really great for women and for men, too, to help detoxify and get some micronutrients and fibers. So, a lot of stuff as a base, you've kind of heard before. And then, avoiding the carbs, I think for women, we can tend to have PCOS or and for men too, when we have extra body weight, it throws off our hormones. So, watching the carbohydrates starts to become especially important at this time. Okay.
Well, any other part of the DRESS program stand out as a key thing? I mean, exercise and rest and all that too. Do you put all your clients on a total DRESS program? Where does that fit in?
Yeah, so when I was doing more fertility clients, I wasn't an FDN yet. But I kind of had my own similar little system. So exercise was one of them, and then supportive modalities was another. I'll touch on exercise first. For men, getting some more exercise is needed. Doing some burst training or something can be good for raising testosterone, which we need to make sperm and to feel good and have sex drive. So, for men, sometimes getting more active. Women need to be active too, but not too active. So I encourage frequency over intensity. So if you've got a desk job, making sure you're getting up a lot, you're moving around through the day, using a sit-stand desk. A lot of that congestion in our reproductive area just comes from sitting so much. So, some things that are good for women can be yoga or belly dancing. If you're a big runner or you're doing a lot of CrossFit and you're being really intense and you're not getting pregnant, it might be time to cut down. As we know, that exercise can stress the system, too much intense exercise. So, just thinking about kind of nurturing and moving more often and taking hikes, getting outside, going on a bike ride with your husband. So I would just say some moderate exercise or a little more intense exercise is tolerated, but kind of finding the Goldilocks there. And then there's a lot of supportive modalities for fertility. Acupuncture is very powerful for fertility. Lowers cortisol, regulates the endocrine system, gets circulation to the reproductive areas, and can support some of the things we're doing in FDN, like working on digestion and helping with sleep and that kind of thing. So I think it's important to get support around this time and do things that feel good, whether it's getting massage or, going to your favorite workout class or going on a retreat at a spa. It's really doing all those things that make you feel whole and connect with your body are important. And I can talk about a few supplements that I like if you want.
Yeah, I would like it.
Sure. So I guess one herb I use a lot and you do see on the internet a lot is Vitex or chaste tree. It helps the communication between your brain and your ovaries. So if you find that you're not ovulating or that you have what we call a weak luteal phase, the second phase of your cycle is kind of wobbly, which we know from a basal body temperature charting, that herb can help. It's not really one to be used forever and ever, but 3 to 6 months should help correct some patterns for women. There is a supplement I like called mitochondrial ATP by Pure Encapsulations.
Yeah.
And it has CoQ10 and different antioxidants. It's a little expensive, but it's pretty great for egg quality or potentially sperm quality too, which a lot of my folks are dealing with, just to kind of give energy to the egg. The one way that we can influence the egg, even when we're older, is to get it lots of circulation with nutrient-rich blood and to let it have available to it things like the CoQ10 and the antioxidants, because the egg grows so fast. It becomes the largest cell in the body, and all that energy is coming from its own store, and then it's putting off oxidation as it grows. So if we can give some antioxidants into the mix, that can be some support to the egg. Along that lines, Oregon heart meat also has a lot of CoQ10. So if you're up for it, you can ask your butcher for chicken hearts, and they're really not that bad tasting, and you can, mix in those a little bit with your meat or your chili or something.
Yeah, you can always grind up these organs. I know people that live next to butcher, out in the country, and someone butchers a cow or something. They go down here and get parts, and they just put it in ground up, meatloaf and sausage and stuff like that, like adrenals and whatever.
Yeah, just mix it in. You won't even taste it.
Yeah, I've had some really good meatloafs that were made with custom, blends. And I was just real quickly, Bridgit, I'm going to ask if the audience would like to ask a question. Brandon's monitoring for raising your hand, folks. So I know there's quite a few people on the line live with us. I'd like to have you jump on and ask Bridgit, or if you have a relevant, comment or anecdote, that'd be okay to jump in here and keep it nice and relaxed and things like that. So just press number 1 if you have a question for Bridgit, and Brandon is monitoring that, and we'll bring you on. So, I totally see how this would be we recently have been getting some training in marketing, and niching is really good. Of course, you could help anybody. You could start off with a niche, something like that. Well, let's say someone though did want to niche this way. Is there something you'd want to tell new practitioners in the field of fertility to do, or make sure they're aware of that you haven't covered already?
Yeah, we covered a lot. So just to kind of recap, be sensitive to where they're at. Don't make any promises you can't keep. Be realistic about the timeline. Besides that, one thing I would say is if you are going to work in this area, you're going to have people coming to you, and they're going to want you to look at their labs and look at their sperm results. And, in my opinion, I think that it's better that you do that. You might say, okay, well, also see your doctor, also see this other person, but, you should know some of these markers of fertility what should my FSH number be? What should my AMH number be? How do my sperm results look? And take some research or some education, but I think it's good to know these things because, these people coming to you after a year or two, they know their stuff. They're like little fertility experts already. So you don't want to just say, oh, I don't know about that and toss it to the side. Have some understanding of some of these markers, some of the genetics that could be involved, like the MTHFR can be involved. Take the time to learn some of those things, and it's actually really fun. There's a lot to learn, and it's really interesting. So learn some of those things, and what else? Yeah.
Any questions, Brandon?
Yeah, I've actually got a caller here from area code 201 with the hand raised. Let me bring you on here. Okay, area code 201. Hi. What's your name? What's your question for Bridgit?
Hi, my name's Jennifer. I'm actually calling from Austin, Texas. And Bridgit, I love that you're doing this and helping couples in infertility. I myself went through the battle of infertility, and I did have to go down the IVF process. But I'll tell you what, if I had something like FDN to help me even through IVF, I would have done it. Are you helping couples in the IVF process as well?
Yeah, so is it Jennifer? Is that it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, Jennifer. Yeah,
Hi.
So it's pretty funny. As soon as I got my FDN certificate, I stopped practicing. But then we're going to talk about why I'm putting on this big hormone summit. So I've kind of moved in the direction of more of being an educator than to being a practitioner, at least for now. I kind of needed to take a little break. But could you do it together? Absolutely. You definitely could do it together. I would just say you have to be a little careful with the supplements and that kind of thing, and the timing, because often people would come to me when they were pretty close to having an IVF, it was a month away or 2 months away or 3 months away. So if you want to say, well, it's going to take you 6 months to do my program, or I think you've got gut bugs and we might need to treat that, you kind of have to just be flexible, with where they're at. Because if they're well, I've got this in a month, I can't do a gut protocol, then that's fine. It's a give and take. I have one colleague, an acupuncturist, who's kind of a functional medicine guy, and he's in a really good relationship with his local clinics, and he just pounds them with supplements, even if it's a month away or 2 weeks away, high dose fish oil and vitamin C and turmeric, and he just really hits them hard with high dose stuff, and he gets great results, he says, even with a short timeline. So yeah, I would just say be considerate of what timeline you both can agree to. And Jennifer, I don't know how you practice with your FDN, but
I'm just about to do my final next week, so
congratulations.
There. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
But yeah, I have thought about going down the niche of the infertility because obviously with my own struggles, and it was 10 years ago, and I have 3 beautiful kids, but I'll tell you what, if anyone had told me, hey, before you even do the IVF road, try this, I would have done it. So yeah.
Well, from that standpoint, I think the marketing is, to try to phrase the marketing and being where are you at in your journey? Are you thinking of getting pregnant in a year? Are you thinking of getting pregnant in 3 months? Have you already been trying, maybe in some of your marketing, identifying some of the different stages and seeing what the options are at that stage? That way, if they're coming to you at, 2 weeks before IVF, they can read your literature and understand, I could have started sooner, or ideally we'd have more time. Some people might push out the IVF and decide to work with you. Right. Some people might not any go to IVF if I've had that happen too. So, I think that's the advantage of maybe having your marketing start with fertility prep or hormone balancing. That way you're catching the people a little earlier, or at least making them aware that this is a process that takes a little bit of time.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Jennifer, it was really nice to come on and ask a question, and and have the discussion. And I'm very, very pleased that you have your 3 beautiful children. And I think it is a great area that FDNs could be very helpful in, because the people in that situation do need the health. I mean, it's the obvious answer, and they're going about it. And because when you go to a doctor, what's your disease? What's your diagnosis? Infertility. Yeah. Oh, that's a tough one. And so how do they go about it? They go like this. They have a lot of different sort of techniques that are very medically based. And listen, I don't blame anyone. I think that in vitro fertilization, the IVF you're talking about, is a modern miracle, and thank goodness for it for those that want to have children that just can't, But I think
and if I didn't have IVF, I might not have 3 beautiful kids. However, I was only 30 when I was diagnosed infertile, and it was because my period stopped. But in retrospect, and after doing all this FDN work and just balancing my hormones later in life, I think my diet was terrible, my lifestyle was too stressful, and if I had just taken a year of dealing with that, I might have, not needed the IVF. But, things happen for a reason. But I thank, God or the universe for bringing me to FDN now so that I can help others. So I just feel this calling for that.
Amen, sister. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you say, you got to move forward on stuff. But yeah, it's being treated as if it is a medical condition, and you went through that, and it probably was. I mean, who knows with you? But I mean, I know for certain that in many cases it is not a medical condition, and we run up against that in FDN all the time with our clients. Like, is this a medical condition, or is this just a functional condition? Because there are voids in people's metabolism and function. I mean, you could have had no ovaries. Well, you can't. Doesn't matter how much green beans you eat. Or you could eat a lot of almonds before you figure out, it's because I didn't have any. And there are other genetic, genetic and acquired voids in function that you're going to come up against. But gosh, let's do everything we can first before we see what those are. So we got some other hand raised. Jennifer, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks,
Brandon,
Jennifer.
go ahead and bring on our next question.
All right, area code 303. What's your name? What's your question for Bridgit?
Hi, this is Carrie.
Hi.
Hi there. This may not need anything more from you, but maybe there is something more. I have a stepdaughter who has done IVF unsuccessfully. She's 42, and so here I am. I've just graduated from FDN, and I really want to talk to her about working with her, see if she wants to do that. But I've had the impression, and I just really haven't investigated this, so you can tell me this. I have a feeling that there's a lot of hormonal manipulation in the IVF process, and if that's true, is there anything that you would do differently, just going on the DRESS program and doing the regular labs that we do, to try to get somebody back into balance in their hormones and throughout the rest of their body, healing whatever needs to be healed with digestion and gut and so on, of course. But is there anything special that needs to be done after someone's been through an IVF process and not had success, as far as starting an FDN program?
What do you think, Bridgit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it is a high level of hormones they're giving, and they're synthetic. I think that they're better or more careful about them than they used to be. I think there used to be more side effects than they are now. They monitor now for like ovarian overstimulation and that kind of thing. But that being said, it's a lot of hormones for the body. So detoxifying those hormones, I think, is really important. Some doctors will say, take a month or two off before trying IVF again, and I think that's prudent because it's, you got to get that out of your system and let the body reset. So yeah, you can do things like supporting gut health for detoxification and breakdown of estrogen, support liver. I don't know, Carrie, if she wants to try again or what her case is, but at 42, egg quality is a big deal for her. Now they can test the eggs genetically and kind of score them quality-wise, but you could do a lot. We mentioned the mitochondrial support. That's really big for her, circulation to the reproductive area, good nutrition. But at 42, it will typically take a year at least to get pregnant. It's a tough time, and if she has had any, history of poor health, it could, take even longer. But I think the FDN would be great, and what you could do for her would be great. And it's definitely not impossible to get pregnant at 42 at all. But she just really, I always say, my 40-year-olds, my 40-somethings really have to embrace health, on every level to get to the point where they can reproduce.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. I think that probably answers it right there. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great question. Thanks for jumping on. You got another one, Brandon?
Yeah, we got another one here, area code 508. So area code 508, what's your name? What's your question for Bridgit?
Hi, this is Suzanne. I'm an FDN trainee, and my question is, are you seeing women going into menopause or perimenopause earlier than they should be or than they used to, and from low levels of hormones or any other reason? And what do you think is the normal age to be beginning perimenopause versus what you're seeing clients?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one I've been thinking about a lot. So I'm 41, and I think maybe Reed and I on our summit interview talked a little bit about age and early menopause and this kind of a thing. So there's a couple ways to look at this. So perimenopause does start at 35 as our ovaries start to decline in their function. And then for some women, they might not have any symptoms for quite some time, at least not that are overt. And others will have some. So how much of that is, to be expected and genetically based, and how much of that is environmental, or it's because of, how what state our bodies are in. I think every case is a little bit different. I think our hormones are naturally changing from 35 to 50. From what I see for fertility, I usually feel pretty good that my 35 to 39-year-olds will get pregnant. I do see some increased miscarriage though in that zone because their egg quality is declining. And so do I see perimenopause starting sooner? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes even before 35, right? We see kind of this decline. There's a connection between gluten and egg quality that they found, So, there's some autoimmune diseases that can affect the ovaries. So every case is a little different. And when should you expect symptoms of perimenopause? That's a really good question. I think everyone will experience it a bit differently. And if you feel like, well, I'm too young for this, then, work on the underlying patterns, work on the detoxification, do all the stuff we do in FDN. I think mostly what we can do to make our perimenopause smoother is just take really good care of our health. And if, we're doing everything right, we still may have a little bit of symptoms, but I think it will be a lot less than if we're, having alcohol every night and not sleeping and all this stuff. So I hope that helps, Suzanne. What do you think?
Yes, that helps a lot, actually. And I know that so many women have been on birth control for so long, and then they, into their 30s is when they get off birth control, whether it's to have a child or even just to be off of it. By that point in your sort of mid to late 30s, you're kind of going to start perimenopause. You may never have another normal cycle, you might have normal cycles, but you might quite never be, because now your body's in perimenopause, but you've been on birth control for so long, your body probably just kind of chaos with the hormones, don't know what to do. So I don't know if I would guess that makes it even more difficult. And then I was just thinking of lots of women in their late 30s who are, like I said, been on birth control, then they get off.
Yeah, we see that a lot. Well, thanks so much for calling in, Suzanne. It was really great, and really glad to have you on the FDN team, Bridgit. Where are you located again?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I hope everything's good up there. And I know it's a big area for, there's a lot of naturopaths, naturopathic schools and things like that. So you're in an amazing area. I know the people up there are, deeply concerned about the natural, the environment, natural things, and they drink good coffee.
We drink a lot of coffee, but not me. I don't drink any coffee.
Well, thanks again, Bridgit, and see you later, Brandon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.